滔滔夜更长，四海英雄聚今朝，苍天笑，拔剑斩红腰，狼杀淘尽怒百笑。整整70年，他把中华人民主义，还让这片土地变得满目疮痍。全世界投毒制造各种生化武器，我去，他答应了人类命运共同体。3代爆料，携手占有新天道，振兴我中华同胞，兴起了灭共浪潮。壮志冲云霄，看那国旗飘飘，别鸟铁岭河上，神州阳光普照。江山笑，血雨遥，谁负谁生出一份笑。风萧萧，人笑显怒潮。太古开天风潮。3年多的爆料，就是给压死个中方实锤，每天都有一点也不嫌多。以美灭共，以共灭共，还得靠我们战友们行动。天佑我中华儿女，共建联邦新中国。黑夜显祖国，照亮东方的天。戳破公会的谎言，我准备了但是多年。越过了死亡幽谷，踏上了灭共之路。总有太多雄剑不出啊，只能虚度。听风笑，收归正道。一周他老自逍遥。苍生笑，热血万丈高。仰天长啸志英豪。战友们豪气穿云霄，盘古相聚在今朝。我定报 The voice to save the world, save the lives, the people's die. We are running out of time. Take down, action, take down the system. Take down, action, take down the system. La 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 la. 为母亲眼中的期望。兄弟们站起来反抗，英雄故事必被后代传唱。我们是勇士的民族，过去的血在身上流淌，神圣的母语放声高喊，我们的名字大呀！哦嘿呦，哦嘿呦，哦嘿呦，哦嘿呦，哦嘿呦，哦嘿呦，哦嘿呦，哦嘿呦，哦嘿呦，哦嘿呦。旗帜在马背上，雄鹰矗立在我肩膀，一生在战场，是我的荣耀。嘿呦，嘿呦，嘿呦，伟大的长城边，我的魂与你同在，我们是的草原真正的主人。嘿呦，嘿呦，嘿呦，我们是的草原真正的主人。嘿呦，嘿呦，嘿呦，我们的名字大呀！
Good evening, Fringers. It is Tuesday, August 17th, 2021. Welcome to episode 57 of The Fringe. I'm your host, David Vincent Bob. As always, The Fringe is brought to you live every Tuesday and Friday from 7 to 8 p.m. That is 1900 to 2000 Eastern Standard Time for our Chinese brothers and sisters. On gtv.org at MOS English and on YouTube at MOS Talk. You can follow me on Getter at DavidBob1. That's DAVIDBOBB, the number one. I'm always posting and updating what's going on in the world today. So just because I stop on the Fringe doesn't mean I stop thinking about what's going on in the world. Follow me on Getter and we can chat there too. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to a young woman who makes the news as tolerable as it could possibly be, no matter how bad it may be. She's the reason I'm here tonight. It's my amazing co-host, the lovely Isla. Welcome, Isla. So great to have you here tonight. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much, David, for always having such a beautiful opening for our Fringers. And a warm welcome for me every time. So good evening, Fringers. It is my great pleasure to come back on the show and to do another, the Fringe program. It is the episode 57 with all of your continuous support and following. We definitely appreciate all of the things that you do to support the whistleblowers movement, the new federal state of China, and obviously our farm and the programs that we have. So as usual tonight, we will be covering some latest topics with you regarding COVID-19 and obviously things that happened in Afghanistan. So why don't we get started, David?
Yeah, thank you, Isla. Great again to have you. So again, we talked about this last, what is it, Tuesday? We talked about this Friday, about these cases of COVID overwhelming Texas. It's still happening. Nothing's really getting better there, unfortunately. Let's play that video now.
This week, the Delta variant drove another increase in America's COVID caseload. But just a handful of states accounted for most of the hospitalizations. Florida and Texas account for 40%, according to the White House. Currently, about half of Floridians and 45% of Texans are fully vaccinated. Those states are also seeing more kids under 18 hospitalized with COVID-19 than any other state. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and Texas Governor Greg Abbott have both remained resolute in banning school districts from setting mask mandates. Meanwhile, the Texas Tribune is among the outlets reporting on another threat to children's health: respiratory syncytial virus, or RSV. This highly contagious virus can hospitalize kids 5 years old and younger, especially infants. The influx of new COVID patients in hospitals is overwhelming many healthcare workers again. Dr. Owais Durrani practices emergency medicine in Texas. He says that what he's seeing is just as bad as what he saw last year, if not worse.
Yeah, so here we go, Isla. We have a lot to take apart here with this, a lot of layers to this, and stuff that's really starting to disturb me. You know, with me, a big problem I have with the virus in general, other than the fact that it was created by the CCP and they caused this chaos all over the world, is that there are times, Isla, that I'm not sure who to believe. I'm not sure if there really are that many cases, because we've gotten mixed signals since the beginning. And I was just talking to some friend of mine about this yesterday. I did a podcast with a friend, and we were just talking about, actually it was a meeting, it was an online Zoom meeting. And we got into a conversation about COVID and what each of us thought about it. And it's really interesting to talk to your friends and that you don't really see that much, and you know, partners or whatever, and you want to discuss what's going on in the world, and it's pretty shocking how much we agree on things that we didn't know that we agreed upon. And it's interesting because one of the things we talked about that was very important to me was how we are always getting mixed signals about this virus from the beginning, from the time it started, Eileen. You know this, for over a year now, a year and a half, however long we've been dealing with this mess. We've had Dr. Fauci flip-flopping around about mask mandates, wear one mask, no mask, two masks, three masks, whatever. It sounds like a Dr. Seuss book now after a while. And whether or not the vaccines work, we've seen stories about the horrific reactions people have gotten. People have died from the vaccinations, albeit it's a small percentage. It's still enough, Isla, to make you think about getting the vaccine. And that's the big problem here that we're dealing with, is the more I hear news about what's going on with this virus, the more I step back and I'm not sure what to believe. And it's the mainstream media and the government that put us in this position of distrust, because from the beginning, from the time that this all started, again, we were sent so many mixed messages. We weren't given solid guidance on how to proceed. And now we know that these vaccines are experimental and they have not been approved by the FDA. And this is one of those things that I was talking to my friend about yesterday, Isla, was these are not approved by the FDA, by the Food and Drug Administration, but they soon will be. My question is, and I'm gonna leave this out there, and you don't have to answer it right away, it's something maybe you can talk about later if you want. Even if the FDA approves this vaccine or any of these vaccines, will you get it? I know I won't. It's just the way it is with me. I've gotten too many mixed signals. Taking care of my health the way that I want to take care of my health. I'm not going to have anyone forcing me to take a vaccine. It's against humanity. It's against the laws of humanity to do that. You cannot force anybody to do this. They're trying to mandate it, but I'll tell you what, you're looking at a revolutionary war if they try to do that. I certainly hope that doesn't happen. The one thing I do have an issue with, and I'm going to be upfront about this, and because I have friends that have mixed feelings about this too, Isla, and it's the mask mandates. I don't think they should be mandated, first of all. Let me get that clear. Let me make that clear. Masks should not be mandated. They, again, should be something that you choose to do or not to do. But I am on the side of we should wear masks. And the reason is because better safe than sorry. And that's the way I've been carrying myself throughout this entire pandemic, Isla, is better safe than sorry. If you're wearing a mask and you're wearing a K95 mask, or I have this other mask that my wife gave me that has the little filter in it that you can replace, and it's good for like 50 wearings or whatever, and it's very protective and has all these great straps and all this good stuff. It's the top of the line. I figure if I'm wearing that, I feel safe, and that's okay. You know, I know that I'm not going to contract something from somebody who has, you know, particles of their spit mist in the air. My mask will protect me from breathing it, and they will also be protected against something that I may have, which I don't. So that's how I feel about the mask mandates. I think DeSantis is right about that. You should definitely be parents. It should all come down to parents, Isla. Whether or not their children wear masks or they get injected should be the decision of the parents and not the government and not a school. That's not how it should be handled. I know I'm saying this, and then we're also talking about how these cases of COVID have blown up all over the South. But again, going back to my original point, have they really? Are we being told the truth? That's where I have a lot of problems, Isla. I don't believe everything I hear. I never do, especially with the mainstream media. So that's a lot to digest, I know. And if I confused you or didn't give you something to talk about, which I probably did, I apologize. But that's where I am with all of that. And seeing the map of the South and how the red is creeping north, the red of infected people is increasing and creeping north toward us. Not so sure about it. I don't know how I feel about it. I definitely think there's something out there. But to be honest, Isla, I don't think it's to the extreme that these hospitals and these states are reporting. Over to you.
Right, David. I think up to one point that you're very clear that through the pandemic that we, as normal citizens of different countries, we are receiving a lot of miscommunication or misleading signals from the mainstream media and from the government. That remember that Fauci was fighting himself about how many masks should people wear. First he said no masks, and then he said people should wear masks. And later on, he said, no, you should wear double masks. So, all kinds of the arguments was a year ago, but still, up till now, that people are still receiving a lot of confusion when they're reading newspapers about it. And obviously, the mainstream media wasn't posting the truth about this COVID-19. First of all, it took almost a year and a half for a lot of people to discuss the origin of this virus. That being said, the Wuhan Institute of Virology, the CCP virus, very few media outlets were, brave enough to touch upon the virus links with the Chinese Communist Party. And for all of our supporters, the members in the whistleblowers movement in the new federal state of China, we all know that Mr. Meng Shuo had actually warned people a long time ago about, the truth of this virus. And first of all, the Chinese Communist Party intentionally created and released this virus from the Wuhan lab. And second, since it's intentionally created and released, it is being called or considered as a biological warfare rather than a normal pandemic that we are going through. So, up till this moment, a lot of the current administration's officials are still promoting the vaccination over the country. And in fact, not only with the mask mandates on the children, they're asking employees, health workers, or even the students in colleges and in middle schools to take vaccines that are ineffective and are not going approved by the FDA. Like you said, a lot of the vaccines are actually experimental stage. So these are the problems and the challenges that we are facing. Like for the previous programs, we actually talked about how, the county with a higher vaccination rate actually had a higher rate of COVID-19 new variants infection. So that being said, a lot of the vaccination actually doesn't help to prevent the new COVID variant. It actually increases the chance for people who were vaccinated to get infected with the new Delta variant. And we see that a surge in case of COVID-19 after the Delta variant has hit the US. And we are also aware of the new Lambda variant are, creating some damage to this country as well. So back to you, David. My question was, since people are still, receiving a lot of confusion regarding, the truth of COVID-19, how should they protect themselves, or how should they distinguish what kind of information should they listen to?
Well, that's an easy answer. Come to gtv.org and watch The Fringe. We'll give you the answers. No, I think Mr. Miles Guo really has a lot of great guidance for all of us. And, all joking aside, if you're watching the show tonight, tell your friends to come on gtv.org.
Right.
We got information that nobody else in the world has. And someday we'll be out there to a larger audience than we serve to right now. But hey, baby steps, right, Isla? I say I don't ever give advice. I just tell people what I do and let them make their own decisions. That's how life should be, really. That's how the news should be. That's how the news used to be. That's funny you asked me that, because the news used to be you give people the information and let them make up their minds. But now the news has taken sides. We have a left and a right. Mostly CNN, MSNBC, ABC, and mainstream media falls to the left, and Fox News is, Fox is being more. And actually, a lot of people that watch Fox don't like this, but I like that they're more moderate. I'm going to be honest with you. I like that we can hear what the other side has to say and try to work our way to the middle and try to solve the problem from the inside, because we got to strengthen from the inside out. As you know, we'll be weak from the outside. I know I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent here, but there's a point to all this, because your question was what kind of advice do I give? But like I said, so you can't really rely on anybody, especially even me. You can't rely on me to give you advice. I can only tell you what I do and let you make your decision. I think wearing masks is the best thing to do, I really do. I think that they, whether or not you want to, it protects you from other people, and it protects you from spreading it to other people and you from receiving it. I think I mentioned this. There was the awful Spanish flu. The way that it's decided was people wore masks. They didn't have a vaccine for it. People started wearing masks and it stopped spreading. That's really what's going to do it, to be honest with you. That's what I think. These viruses always have a way of dissipating. They kind of run their course and then they disappear. This one's a little stronger because it was created in the lab and they made it that way. So we just got to endure for a little longer. Obviously, it's been pretty apparent from what we see in the news media and from our government that this is a huge money grab for a lot of people. I don't think it's as serious as they're saying. I think a lot of what they're doing is to scare people into doing things that will earn them more money, because money is the root of all evil. That's what I'm starting to see from all of this. I'm not going to say that the virus doesn't exist. It does. I'm not going to go that far, crazy radical right with it. The virus does exist. I don't think it's as serious as they say, and I don't think you should be as afraid as they want you to be, because that's really what the CCP wants. They want us to be scared. They want us to go hide. But I think there's other solutions to this. Well, and the first answer would be to take down the CCP. But as far as taking care of yourself, yeah, absolutely. Wear a mask, keep your safe distancing, wash your hands until we figure out what's going on here. Till we figure out the truth, Isla. That's what I do. I feel, and what's funny, I'm going to just add this one more thing here, is this is an unusual situation. I heard about this, and it's true. This thing, I believed, it's when you wear a mask, you're actually protecting yourself from so many different outside viruses that you notice a lot of people don't even get the common cold. And I noticed that about myself. I'm like, wow, I haven't even had a cold since the pandemic started. And that's because the masks actually block you from getting the common cold. So when people started not wearing masks, they were getting colds at really weird times. Like, why don't I have a cold right now? It's because your body was so working on itself to, it wasn't, you weren't getting those germs and those from the outside. And I guess if you wore a mask all the time, it'd be easier for you to catch something once you took it off. So that's another thing to think about, I'm sure. But for me, like I said, the short answer is wear a mask, wash your hands, keep the safe distance. Notice they don't say that anymore. It's kind of strange. They're not talking about washing your hands as much. And well, they do talk about distancing, but we don't want to go there. There's a lot of people that don't want to do that. But do what works for you, what makes you feel comfortable and safe. And that's what works for me, Ella.
Yeah, David. Well, thank you for your advice on, wearing a mask. Obviously, it's very important for the virus. But, as a reminder for our, friends and fringers to our program, that the virus is actually hitting in a severe situation, not only in mainland, but also in other countries as well. Look at the data on a global scale that we currently have 205 million cases of COVID-19, on a global scale, and we are actually expecting, more numbers coming in, since we know that this Chinese Communist Party, according to Mr. Miles Guo's information, that the Chinese Communist Party is, planning to release another wave of virus in, the expected fall, in the coming fall. So we actually don't see an end of resolving this pandemic in a short period. We have to do a long-term preparation, not only mentally, but also, obviously social distancing, but reduce your time of, getting out. Probably you would reconsider whether you should, hang out with friends. And obviously, like what David said, wearing a mask at all times in public area would really help to protect yourself. And I do want to, send out like just a warning or a second time reminder that we have a lot of our members in the whistleblowers movement got infected by the COVID-19 as well. They do, understand the truth of COVID-19. They do certain protocols to protect themselves, but they were still hit by the virus, because the virus doesn't distinguish whether you were allying with the CCP or not. Even though we're doing, spreading all of the truth about it, it is still possible for us, for each of us, to get virus in our daily life situations. So obviously, I think people really need to pay attention to, sanitizing their hands, trying to, sanitizing some public area if you can, wearing masks at all times, like what David said. So yeah, David, like what we said, also, I think New Zealand, Australia are also experiencing, COVID hit attacks as well. So why don't we, move on to our second video?
No, I just wanted to say one more thing real quick, and we didn't talk about this, but it's the way this, I didn't want to play the rest of the video because there's a lot, you'll be hearing about this. I mean, I think this needs to be talked about, Isla, because it's very important. And it's the RSV infection. Now, I've heard of this before. The RSV infection, it's the respiratory syncytial virus. Basically, children get it. It's for kids under 2, usually newborns. They get it. It's a virus that it's easily gotten by kids. It's very, very, very treatable. It's been around for a long time. It's treatable. Kids get it, and they get treated for it, and they overcome it. It's no problem. It's normal. It's like getting a cold, except it's a respiratory infection for very, very young children. But I don't like how the mainstream media is throwing it out there like there's a lot more cases of this, and there's COVID involved and all this. That's the thing with this. We're just now hearing about RSV again all of a sudden. And what I would hate to see is the fact that they're bringing this up because they want to give 2-year-olds and newborns COVID injections, and they have no choice, obviously, in the matter as to whether or not they're going to get that poison put into their bodies. So it's something that I think we should be aware of, Isla. It's definitely something that's been around for a long time, the RSV, and the fact that they're mixing it in with COVID now has me concerned, and I'm going to keep my eye on this, and we'll be talking about it more in the future.
Sure.
Okay, so I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just going to say, so Chris, please, just push the second video for our fringers. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the COVID. I'm sorry. Where are we at here? Sorry.
The COVID.
We're in Sydney, Australia now, ladies and gentlemen, and fringers out there. And troops are enforcing a COVID-19 lockdown in Sydney, and that's martial law. So let's take a look at that.
200 troops were deployed across Australia's biggest city, Sydney, on Monday to enforce the city's 8th week of a COVID-19 lockdown. It comes as the city records its largest one-day rise in COVID-19 cases since the pandemic began. That's according to New South Wales Chief Health Officer, Dr. Kerry Chand.
Disturbingly, we saw 478 locally acquired cases of COVID to the 24 hours to 8 p.m. last night. Too many people are infectious in the community, and it is critical that we all heed and take part in the actions we're required to undertake.
New South Wales State Premier Gladys Berejiklian confirmed 7 people in Sydney died from COVID in the last 24 hours, including a 15-year-old boy who also had pneumococcal meningitis. She warned Australians of the long road still ahead.
It's a horrible situation. We need to turn that around. But can I make this point? To suggest that we're going to have zero the whole way through until the pandemic ends across the world is, I don't think, a realistic proposition.
Australia is now vulnerable to the highly infectious Delta variant, with only 26% of its adults fully vaccinated. The national capital, Canberra, along with Melbourne and Darwin, saw alarming daily case rises on Monday and will remain under lockdown for at least another 2 weeks.
So I kind of want to just start this. I want you to start something off for me. I want to get your thoughts on what you think about troops being deployed to enforce a COVID-19 lockdown. And I'm going to ask you, now that we see that's happening in Sydney, if that spread to the United States, what do you think it would be like in the U.S. if they tried to enforce this in the United States? What do you think about that, Isla?
Well, obviously, I think the situation, is a bit different because we actually see troops coming in mainland China. We actually see that the CCP sending troops to regional lockdown. The purpose of what the CCP sending troops is to make sure that people don't spread out the videos, the photos, and they try to silence all of the information inside. That's the purpose of how CCP sending the troops. I'm not sure why the Sydney city are actually sending troops to help people to lock down. Are they sending supplies to its own citizens? And obviously that's can become a good reason. But I mean, in the same time, I think this would cause a regional panic to the public, on a public surface, because it really delivers a message to the public that they were hitting by something that we can call like a biological warfare. This is how, and in my understanding, this is why they're using troops to correspond to the situation.
Well, they're using the troops, Isla, to make sure that nobody's out in the streets, and it's basically martial law. They're enforcing the lockdown, which means they're going to be walking the streets with their weapons and their tanks and their guns and whatever else they got, making sure nobody's out in the street walking around. That's what it is. They're enforcing the lockdown. That's the problem. It's pretty much martial law. That's what this is. So
and that's what more similar to what the Chinese Communist Party's troops, or we can see the PLA did to its own people.
Exactly. Now, I don't understand this. And the thing is, if my point is, if this happened in the U.S., I think the outcome wouldn't be very pretty at all. I'm not sure how the Australians are going to react. We probably should get somebody on Australia. That's what we should do. Actually, we'll talk about that later, but let's get someone on the show from Australia. So there you go, Fringers. We'll definitely make sure we get someone from Australia and New Zealand on the show and see how they're reacting to all this. But the troops enforcing a lockdown is martial law. That's what that is. You're locking people down because they have 478 cases in 24 hours, and of those 478 cases, they said 7 died. They said, and one was a 15-year-old boy that had pneumonia. So again, these numbers, and people know this, and that's the problem, because there's been reports of this. We've heard it from people that go through this, that have had loved ones or had themselves been in or hospitalized with COVID, that they didn't actually have COVID, they just had the flu or a common cold. I'm not saying, again, that it doesn't exist. It does. We know that. The numbers are getting skewed, though, and that's the problem right here, Isla, is we know that we have a pandemic, but we also know we're being taken advantage of. And that's the problem with the rest of the world, too. They see it also. So that's the whole problem with this entire pandemic from the gate, is that we know we have it, but we don't know how serious it is because people are messing with numbers to get, we know that if you have so many cases of COVID reported at your hospital, you get more money to the hospital to help out with the pandemic, et cetera. I think it's a money grab for a lot of people. Again, I am not saying that this isn't serious. This is very serious. I just am not sure that what's getting reported is what's really going on here. And it leaves people in doubt because when we look at what the long-term picture is, it's what is called transhumanism. And I know I'm going off on a little tangent here, but people know about this. They know that the elite want to depopulate the world, basically. The richest 1% of the world, these billionaires, believe in transhumanism. And it's something that's been discussed on Steve Bannon's War Room. And it's basically that the top 1%, the richest people in the world, from all over the world, not just from the US, but from China, Australia, wherever, any country in the world that has these mega rich people that don't believe in God, want to extend their lives. So experiments are being done on embryos. And part of their world order plan is to get the population of the world down to 500,000 people. And it's also to depopulate the world. So that goes hand in hand. If you have a virus that's going to kill a lot of people, that works in hand with what they want to do. So that goes against my argument, of course, that this might not be as serious as what they say. But again, there's so much out there that we have to look at and that needs to be broken down. And will we ever get, the problem is, Alan, the thing I deal with on a daily basis is, will we ever hear the real truth? What I do know is this, Isla, and I'll throw that back to you and ask you that question. We know that the CCP created this virus. We know they have the cure. When will we hear the truth, or will we ever hear the truth? Will this happen, Isla? Well, I mean, how long? You know, it's an open-ended question, really, but you can answer it or not answer. But how long are we stuck in this situation, basically?
Well, I have no idea of how long would we be expecting the situation, obviously, because I don't have such an internal intelligence like what Miles did. But I think since we have, a voice from the whistleblowers movement and from the new federal state of China, I think more and more people would start to pay attention to our movement and to the NFSC and obviously to our information, because up to this point, I think people are all finding the solutions for the pandemic, and obviously more and more people would realize that the vaccination won't be a reliable answer to what had happened regarding the CCP virus. So, back to why, we see a lot of administrations, including the Chinese Communist Party and Australia government, are sending troops to control the lockdown. That, David, you were right, that we were being taken advantage of this virus. But guess who did this? People should all blame on the CCP, right? It's the Chinese Communist Party. They want to release the virus, and they want to change and control every human being's life on this planet. And that's what we find the root of all of the situation. We've been also talking about how disastrous the Tokyo Olympics would be. We see all of the rising cases of COVID-19 in Tokyo during the Olympic time. So, I don't know. I think obviously a lot of people are expecting when would we take down the CCP successfully, and to eliminate the all of the darkness and the evilness that the CCP had brought to the world, and especially regarding the COVID-19. But we don't have a specific timeline to tell our friends, unfortunately. And if we do, that we are lying to the people. So I'm still holding confidence that we are spreading out the truth, that one day we will see a lot of people are, asking for the information from the whistleblowers movement, because all of the people want to survive in this pandemic. And you were right, David, that the mainstream media, for a lot of the information outlets, are making people very confused about how they should protect themselves. In the darkness, I think in the dark time created by the CCP, the only thing is that we really need to understand what kind of situation were we in right now, that we were in a war with the Chinese Communist Party because they have launched a biological warfare. And in fact, if we don't do any, sanctions, or we don't do any actions to fight back against the CCP to take down the communist regime, that we will be hit by another new virus, because the CCP had so many P4 and P3 labs that were affiliated with the PLA, affiliated with the Chinese Communist Party. And these are potential threats to all human beings, not only the Chinese people. David.
Yeah, you made some great points there. And yes, we are in a biological war with China. A lot of people don't realize that. But what people do know is we are also at war with the Taliban. And as you all may have heard, the capital of Afghanistan, Kabul, has fallen to the Taliban right after U.S. troops recently withdrew. So let's roll that story now, please.
We begin with Afghanistan and the dramatic fall of the capital. Just today, President Biden sending more troops, a total of 6,000 now, to speed up the emergency evacuation of embassy staff and some Afghans who helped the U.S., such as interpreters and their families. The White House releasing this photo of the president being briefed on the developments on the ground. Helicopters and black smoke visible. American diplomats, including the ambassador, evacuated to the airport. At least 500 staff leaving the country so far. The embassy shuttered, the flag coming down. Secretary of State Blinken declaring to ABC's Jonathan Karl, this is manifestly not Saigon. These images from Al Jazeera claim to show Taliban fighters inside the presidential palace. Earlier today, the president of Afghanistan fled the country, saying he chose to avoid bloodshed. Thousands of Afghans now scrambling to get out. The Kabul airport packed earlier today. We have team coverage. ABC's Martha Raddatz, Rachel Scott standing by. But we begin with our senior foreign correspondent, Ian Pannell, who leads us off tonight from Kabul.
Tonight, the Taliban taking Kabul, Afghanistan's capital and last government stronghold. This footage from Al Jazeera purporting to show Taliban fighters inside the presidential palace declaring the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, marking the end of a 20-year experiment of democracy and the stunning completion of the militants' dramatic takeover, seizing nearly all of the country in just over a week.
So that's the shocking part, is they seized the entire country in a little over a week. And we've been there for 20 years, Isla. For those of you that don't know, the U.S. first went to Afghanistan in 2001 after Al-Qaeda bombed we know what happened there with the World Trade Center, crashing their airplanes in the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. What happened because of that was we went in there to protect the Afghanistan people from the Taliban. And recently, recent President 45 Donald Trump has actually talked about doing this, but never followed through with it. And this administration has. And the repercussions of this are definitely are not good. Again, the president had to send in 6,000 more troops to help people escape from Kabul. And what I noticed from the video here was when we saw the Taliban inside of the presidential, right there, yeah, good picture right there. When we saw this, what did that remind you of? Doesn't that remind you of the insurrection at the so-called insurrection at the Capitol? Nancy Pelosi. If you want to know what an insurrection is, there's a picture right there. That's an insurrection. What happened at the Capitol was nothing compared to what just happened in Afghanistan. The craziest part about all this, Isla, is all the people that have died because of this. I kind of have some numbers here I want to share with everybody. Since we've been in Afghanistan protecting their people since 2001 from Al-Qaeda and from the Taliban, we've had 2,448. These numbers are up till April now. These numbers stopped in April. 2,448 U.S. service members killed, 3,846 U.S. contractors killed, 66,000 Afghan military and police killed, 1,144 allies killed, 47,245 Afghan civilians killed, 444 aid workers, and 72 journalists all killed by the Taliban in Afghanistan. That's a total of 121,199 people, almost 122,000. Now, remember, that's only through April. That number surely has gone up since then. And what's about to happen there is going to be even worse. The Taliban, on the other hand, and other opposition combined, 51,191 deaths. That's a difference of 70,008 people. So, Isla, if we're looking at this war in terms of lives, yes, it's a huge loss. And again, the Taliban has seized the entire country of Afghanistan within a week and a half. And the repercussions of this, for those of you that don't know, are catastrophic. We're talking about rape. We're talking about murder, the beheading of Afghanistan people and of the military, the Afghan military, looting, rioting. It's the genocide of Afghanistan is what's going to happen here. These terrorists are animals, pure and simple. They're going to kill civilians, military, and anybody that supports anything that's anti-Taliban. Because that's what sadistic terrorists do, Isla. And that's the worst part about this, is as soon as we pull it out of there, this place went to hell in an instant. And we're going to show a video of the people trying to escape hanging on the airplanes that are leaving hangars, which is horrible. So I'd just like to get your thoughts on this, Isla.
Yeah, I mean, David, I think I just want to remind our fringes that remember that right after the U.S.-China meeting in Tianjin, that the China diplomats actually, let's say the CCP diplomats actually hold a meeting with the Taliban leaders in Tianjin as well. It's sort of like a warning or a threat to tell the whole world that they are using, that the Chinese Communist Party is behind the Taliban group and they are trying to create chaos and disasters in Middle East to break down the peace that were there before. And obviously, right after the Taliban seized over the Afghanistan's presidential palace, you know what the Chinese Communist Party have published on its propaganda. They're trying to favoring the Taliban's group. They're trying to say that it is the U.S. that are sabotaging the name of Taliban. The Taliban is not a terrorist group, which is completely nonsense. I think, back in like maybe a decade ago, I've always heard of like the CCP propaganda saying, actually listing the Taliban group as terrorist groups as well. But, just within the few weeks or years that the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, is actually trying to ally with the Taliban, they are trying to use the Taliban groups, to seize the Afghanistan and to try to posing threats to the U.S. to say, they want world domination. So what we see is that the Chinese Communist Party got, they are so ready. The Communist Party is so ready to possess, any sorts of threats to the U.S. and to the whole world, and are trying to, tell the world that they are ready for a war against whatever countries, and they are using the Afghanistan to set an example. And in fact, for the GTV News Talk program, I think our guests and our other members have mentioned that the CCP is using Taliban to seize over Afghanistan, so that what they want is they're trying to, they're trying to drag the U.S. troops into the Middle East, all of the conflicts, so that we won't be so concentrated, or we would be really distracted in fighting against the Chinese Communist Party. And we, there are so many topics and things that we can talk about. Obviously, the current administration did so badly in response to what happened with Taliban and Afghanistan, and people, express, all sorts of media outlets are expressing disappointment towards Mr. Joe Biden as well. David.
Yeah, actually, the last topic, the last segment tonight, we're going to talk a little bit. Thanks for bringing that up, Isla. You brought some very good points up. In China, and the CCP definitely has their fingers in this one and their tentacles wrapped around it. And we know that. Our last segment, we're going to talk about that tonight. But yeah, this is big news, and it's sad because you think about all these men and women that have died to protect the lives of these people in Afghanistan that are, have these terrorist groups that want to take over this country. And the Taliban has made it very clear, they've said this, that their goal is exactly the same goal as the Chinese Communist Party, world domination. They won't stop until the rest of the world praises Allah, becomes Islam, or if you don't, they're going to chop your head off. That's what they do. They cut people's heads off. That's their way to, and it's the most radical form of Islam that there is. Now, there is speculation. There was speculation before that the Taliban and Al-Qaeda are butting heads with each other, but there's also some speculation that the Al-Qaeda actually helped, the Taliban actually helped the Al-Qaeda to prepare for the bombings, the crashing the planes into the World Trade Center. So there was some alliance that went there with those two. They are two groups, two militant radical Islamic groups that do not like each other. So we'll see how that all plays out. That's another whole layer to this entire thing. Is the Taliban isn't exactly on the same page as as Al-Qaeda. So we'll see how that goes or how that all evolves. They're still, it seems to me, they're still trying to find themselves. Who are they? They know what they represent, but it's kind of chaotic with them, you know, with terrorists. They just, it's always murder first, kill first, ask questions later. That's their mantra. Chop your head off now and you know, then ask you questions after that. Obviously, it's too late by then. But that's the problem here. And this is a very big issue. And like Isla said, Fringers, this is a big deal because we're not only dealing with a biological war with the CCP in China, we're also dealing with this now, this war with the Taliban in Afghanistan that we had to withdraw from. And China sees us as weak now for pulling out. And we're going to talk about that again a little bit later. But they see us as weak now for pulling out of this. And they're going to take advantage of that. So again, we're not only dealing with the biological war that's going on with the CCP, we now have this issue with terrorism taking over Afghanistan again. And they have all of our weapons too. That's the thing. We've left all these missiles and tanks and bombs there, and now the Taliban has them, and you're using them to kill the Afghanistan people and our own citizens. So why they didn't remove their weapons when they evacuated, I have no idea. I'm not sure how long this has been planned. It's been going down for quite some time now that this would happen. They just weren't sure when, and we definitely weren't prepared. As we'll know in another video here coming up, we see the Afghanis hanging on airplanes and falling off of them and dying because they're trying to escape from Afghanistan. I couldn't imagine what it would be like there now, which kind of segues into the next story. There are 10,000 Americans, Isla, awaiting evacuation. Hopefully it won't be that many by this point. We do know that the U.S. has sent over 6,000 troops. As they said, Biden has released 6,000 troops to go over to help with the evacuation effort from Kabul. And we can only imagine how that's going to turn out. You know, we have a whole entire country filled with Taliban fighters. And then we have 6,000 of our troops going over. It's almost like you're marching into death. I don't know how this is going to turn out, but I'm not feeling too good about that. But again, we are working on an evacuation process right now. Let's roll that video, please, Chris.
A defense official tells CBS News the Pentagon is sending in another 1,000 troops to Karzai International Airport in Kabul. That brings the number of authorized American troops in Afghanistan to 6,000. About 3,000 are already on the ground. The airport is America's last toehold in Afghanistan. The Taliban has overrun the capital city, Kabul, and taken over the presidential palace. President Ashraf Ghani has left the country. And a Taliban official says the group will soon announce the formation of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. There have also been reports of gunfire at Karzai International Airport. The U.S. Embassy moved its operations there over the weekend. Officials have instructed Americans to shelter in place. Sources tell CBS News that 10,000 American civilians need to be evacuated from Kabul. CBS News correspondent Christina Ruffini joins us now for more on this. Christina, thanks for joining us. We've learned that the Karzai airport in Kabul is now being run by the U.S. military. What's the U.S. government's plan to evacuate Americans out of Afghanistan?
I think from what we're learning, it appears to be a plan in progress, right? They've taken over the airspace at the airport so they can better control and pick up the tempo of these evacuation flights that they need to start getting out. As you mentioned, sources told me earlier today, up to 10,000 civilians need to come out. And that's not including the SIV applicants. Those are those Afghans who worked for the U.S. as translators or helped the U.S. in some way over this 20-year conflict. The numbers range, but it could be between 40,000 and 60,000 Afghans who qualify for those visas and would need to leave the country out of fear of reprisal by the Taliban. Now, it is hard to process those visas when the U.S. has a full embassy contingent. At the moment, that embassy, that $2 billion American facility, is all but shuttered. It's sealed. The staff has moved to a small airplane hangar at the airport where they're going to try to facilitate visas and getting people out of the country. But the State Department has put out an order that they want everybody out of the country at the end of the month. So that gives them a very small window to process tens of thousands of visas and try to airlift about 10,000 civilians out of the country.
What a mess, Isla. So the embassy shuttered, so they can't do the evacuation process from there. They have to do it from the airplane hangar, like they said. 40 to 60,000 Afghans, as they said, have to be evacuated also. These are people that have, throughout these last 20 years, have worked with our troops and with the Afghani people against the Taliban to help with translation, to help them, pretty much like spies, I guess they would be considered. So there's 40 to 60,000 people that the Taliban will be more than happy to behead and murder if they got their hands on them. So this is a gigantic mess right now, Isla. 40 to 60,000 Afghanis, period, and then 10,000 Americans. So we're taking the total up to 50 to 70,000. They said there's 1,000 troops, I believe, on the ground and 6,000 more coming. It's just a gigantic mess, and there's no time to do this, and there's no place to do it from. With the embassy shuttered, like she said, the only place they can work out of is this airplane hangar. So these are very dire times right here, and what I'm scared about, I'm afraid of, is what's going to happen at those airport hangars. I'm sure our troops are going to be setting up there in a defense position against the insurgent Taliban. But what could come out of that could possibly be some very, with 2 weeks to do this, they don't have a lot of time to do it, and they have to kind of rush it through, because with the Taliban closing in quickly, you're looking at the possible death of thousands and thousands of people at the hands of the Taliban. This is a very sticky situation, and we'll be sure to keep our eye on it, Isla.
Right, David. I think you're 100% correct on the situation that we are facing. Obviously, it's such a bare amount of time for the U.S. troops to help all of the 40,000 up to 60,000 people who are trying to help the U.S. troops to do translations, fighting against the Taliban groups over the past 20 years. And we have already seen a lot of people losing their families, losing their lives in the past week, just to see a lot of the firsthand videos that we have on the GTV and on the Getter. I think obviously what we had right now, I'm still going to point out, like, the problem is right behind the Taliban is the Chinese Communist Party. And in fact, that our next video and our would be to say that China is actually the communist China, the Chinese Communist Party is publicly announcing that they want to build a friendly relationship with the Taliban groups, even after they seize over the Afghanistan presidential palace. So what we see right now, in simple words, that the CCP is announcing to the world that they are collaborating with the terrorist groups in the world. And in the meantime, the terrorist groups is still, taking over Afghanistan for its innocent people's lives. It's no different than what the CCP had committed, in Xinjiang for like the genocide and Hong Kong movements. We see like the evil nature almost the same for those groups. So I think on the Taliban group, on all of the things that happened over the past week, I believe that more and more people would understand how evil the CCP, the nature is.
Yeah, that's right. And that's a good way to segue into this final segment here. And as Isla said, everyone, fringers out there, China is deepening their friendly ties with the Taliban government, which is kind of ironic because they don't like Muslims, as we know, ask the Uyghurs. So let's play that last video, please.
China has signaled that it's ready to work with the Taliban. It says that it welcomes the chance to deepen ties with Afghanistan, a country that shares an 80-kilometer border with.
我们尊重阿富汗人民的意愿和选择。阿富汗战乱已经持续了40多年，停止战争，实现和平，既是3000多万阿富汗人民的一致心声，也是国际社会和地区国家的共同期盼。
China has maintained unofficial ties with the Taliban throughout the U.S. withdrawal from the country. Last month, the top-level Taliban delegation met with Foreign Minister Wang Yi in Tianjin. It promised not to allow Afghanistan to be used as a base for militants, a response to Beijing's concerns over separatists in Xinjiang. In return, China has offered economic support and investment in restructuring efforts.
So you know what economic support and investments are, Isla? That's called the Belt and Road Initiative, the BRI. The same scam that they use with other countries to act like they want to help them rebuild their infrastructures. And then we know what's going to happen here, Isla. This is a power play for the CCP. This has nothing to do with them caring at all. They could give, if I could use a curse word, I would right now. They could give a crap less about the Afghani people or the Taliban or anybody that's Muslim. We already know that the CCP is racist, especially against Muslims. We know what they're doing to the Uyghurs in Xinjiang and the western regions of China, using them as slaves and having them, committing genocide on them. This is a power play for the CCP to take over another country, to control that country, to use it for their own purposes, which is world domination. And the thing that they have working in their corner is the fact that the Taliban wants the same thing. So the CCP is very smart. They're probably a lot smarter than the Taliban are. If I could give them if I could give some kind of comment toward the CCP, that would be positive. They're smart in a very evil way. Let me make sure I establish that point. They're in a very, very evil, malicious way. The CCP is smart, and they will manipulate the Taliban and Al-Qaeda and whoever they have to help them in their goal of world domination. I'm going to tell you something. This woman speaking over in China there, end war and realize peace. They know that there's no end to any war in Afghanistan, and there won't be any peace. The Taliban and Al-Qaeda are terrorist organizations, just like the CCP. They will not realize peace. What kind of peace is there when a faction of people takes over a country and is determined to kill anybody that isn't part of what they are part of? They don't even care if you're going to say, I will switch it. Like we already know that these people, the Afghanistans aren't going to say, oh, I want to be a Taliban now because I don't want to die. No, that's not how they operate. They're going to fight to the death. So there's no peace realized, China. This woman's completely wrong. And this is all about a power play for China. This is disgusting. When I first heard it and just looking at it now, it's so painfully obvious what the CCP has planned here. I know you talked a lot about this earlier, Isla, but I want to see if you want to add to that for us.
Yeah, I mean, right after, it's so ironic that right after the foreign minister of the Chinese Communist Party, Wang Yi, has met the U.S., diplomats in Tianjin, right after that U.S.-China meeting, that the CCP invited the Taliban delegation to Tianjin, to the same city for the meeting as well. It's almost just, sending out a public announcement to the U.S. that they are making some chaos, in the Middle East area. And obviously, we know that the Chinese Communist Party probably gained much confidence to see what the Taliban group had done to destroy Afghanistan. And they would actually, we see a lot of, news reports from the Chinese Communist Party to trying to remind people that they still have the desire to attack Taiwan, to take over Taiwan in the coming months. So I think according to what Mr. Miles was gathered and all of his past videos, that he was very clear about the internal intelligence and information that the Chinese Communist Party had already decided, no matter what, that they are going to attack Taiwan. We just don't know about the time and how they would do it. So obviously, if we don't take down the CCP, it's the price that people are going to pay, that the whole world is going to pay. So I think, just like what the COVID situation, I think everybody, when we look at the news right now, when we look at the what happened to this world right now. We need to understand the problem and the situation that we were put in. And obviously a lot of problems were, can be, tracked back into the Chinese Communist Party, world domination, their genocide in Xinjiang people, their ignorance of the human lives, the value of, unity for other countries. They ignore the power of the truth, and they try to silence all kinds of, whistleblowing information or whistleblowers, whether they were in mainland or overseas in other regions as well. So, as the pandemic's going on, we see a surge in cases everywhere of a Delta variant of the COVID-19, and we see a lot of disappointment of what the CCP had done or had to say, had said to build a relationship, an unofficial relationship with the Taliban group. I think it's the time. It really is the time for those of the people who weren't paying that much attention to the whistleblowers movement or to the new federal state of China. It is the time for them to realize the evil nature of the CCP, and it is the time for almost everyone on this planet to make a choice whether we still want to keep this communist China regime or we want to take down the CCP.
Yeah, that's right, Isla. And I like to read sometimes what our fringers are writing out there, and it says someone wrote CCP is the biggest terrorist, and that's right, they are. The Chinese Communist Party is a terrorist organization. They're compared to as an international mafia organization, basically. They're corrupt, they're evil. They and the Taliban will fit together perfectly. But what Isla said is something we all need to definitely do, fringers, and please tell people about the show and spread the word about what we're talking about here, because we're bringing it to you like no one else does. You don't hear about this stuff every day. You don't know about the Lambda variant that's coming. We're here to tell you about it, unfortunately, so you can prepare yourself. But what we have now in this world is a powder keg that's about to explode, and it's not going to be pretty. We have another variant that's that the CCP is threatening to release all over the world. Of a virus, a very deadly virus, that's predicted to take out 1 in every 3 people. Basically, 30% of the population will die from this virus. We have a biological warfare against the rest of the world by the CCP. We have the CCP joining forces with the Taliban, which is a hateful terrorist organization that also wants to take over the world. We have the CCP siding with Russia, Iran, North Korea. This thing, and as Alice said, we also know about what's going on in Taiwan, what's happened in Hong Kong. The CCP went against their plan and want to take over Taiwan, Hong Kong again, and take them out of that political peacefulness that they've had there. And they also want to take over Taiwan. They're bullying themselves around the world, as they always have and always done, but they seem to be ramping things up here, Isla. And we have to remain diligent, and we must at some point say enough is enough and take down the CCP. And unfortunately, it's going to have to mean going to war with China, and we're going to have to start siding with, getting our allies on it. And I think that's already happening, and especially in the South China Sea, as we know, with our allies positioning themselves in the South China Sea to help protect Taiwan from the CCP. And as Mr. Miles Guo said, this war with Taiwan against the Chinese Communist Party is to deflect attention away from the fact that they are also going to have a biological war going on and release this virus in the U.S. So as Isla said, and all over the world, actually, the Lambda variant. And as Isla said, the most important thing here, folks, is that we do take down the CCP. That's been our goal from the beginning. We talk about it ad nauseum every single episode, and we'll keep talking about it and spreading the news about it until something happens. So that's going to wrap it up for tonight. We have another show coming this Friday. Again, the Fringe is broadcast live every Tuesday and Friday from 7 to 8 p.m. That's 1900 to 2000 right here on gtv.org at MOS English and on YouTube at MOS Talk. You have any final words you want to say tonight to our fringers out there, Isla?
Well, I think always I want to appreciate for all of our Fringer members, the continued support and following for our program. And obviously, it's a tough time, not only for us, but also for what had happened and what other country had experienced in COVID-19 or the Taliban group or all kinds of the CCP's, threats. So definitely keep following what the whistleblowers movement had. Remember to check, Getter about Mr. Miles' latest videos, information, and messages, and definitely, follow David or me on Getter as well, just to, get the latest updates of the program as well. We want to, thank you again for the continuous support of our, not only for the whistleblowers movement, but also for the farm and for our program.
Isla, what's your Getter ID? Forgot to tell them.
Oh, my Getter ID was Isla7, so AILA number 7. So it's a simple ID, but I am not, unlike David. He did I think you are more bilingual on Getter than I do. So I saw you're posting Chinese content and English contents as well. Most of my contents would be a mixed. So sometimes I post in Chinese. Sometimes usually I repost what Miles had posted and other information that I saw on Getter.
Yeah, I do too. And yes, I'm only bilingual on Getter because I go to Google Translate and I translate in Chinese what I want to say in English. And I usually post the Chinese first because I get more hits on that one. The Chinese people are very supportive of Getter and of us. So they're and we want to thank them. I want to thank everybody out there that follows us every single Tuesday and Friday, that gets on Getter and follows us and comments. We see your comments. We love what you do. We always wish you to be safe. And we appreciate your patronage, really, we do here, especially at the Fringe, coming on every Tuesday and Friday. Again, we'll be back again this Friday at 7 p.m. So until then, I like to say, as I always say, be safe, be free, and God bless you and your families. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a great evening. God bless.
他们的恐惧是我们的武器，我们的胜利。谢谢了，兄弟姐妹们，你们健身了吗？行动，行动，行动！中共，你完了 ！Take down the CCP！
For the games you want to play, bring it on and I will fight to the end. Just watch and see. It's all started, everything's begun, and you are over. 'Cause we're taking down the CCP. Spread the word all through Hong Kong. We will fight till they're all gone. We rejoice when there's no more. Let's take down the CCP. They have all lied for too long. We will end what they do wrong. Spread the word all through Hong Kong. Let's take down the CCP. Let the bullets fly a little longer, and you will surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer. We will have freedom to live. We will win. You'll surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer. Let the bullets fly a little longer.
中共，
Let the bullets fly a little
你
longer.
完了！
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
中共，你完了！干灭中国共产党这个 CCP， 才能让我们远离恐惧。Take down the CCP。
They try to scare the nation with fabrication, but we see through the lies. We won't fall, we will fight you back. Police corruption with crooked assumption. They ran our lives, but no more. We will win. We will take down the CCP. to live, we will win. You'll surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer. Let the bullets fly a little longer.
站起来吧！
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
站起来吧！
Let the bullets fly a little
为
longer.
奴役的人们
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
行动！
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
行动！
Let the bullets fly a little
你
longer.
完了！
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take it down!
Bullets fly a little longer, and you will surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer. We will have freedom to live. We will win. You'll surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take it down!
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take it down!
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take it down!
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take it down!
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take it down!
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take it down!
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take it down!
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take it down!
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take it down!
The evil CCP.